Hello, I'm Natalie Zett, and welcome to Flower in the River. This podcast, inspired by my book of the same name, explores the 1915 Eastland disaster in Chicago and its enduring impact, particularly on my family's history. We'll explore the intertwining narratives of others impacted by this tragedy as well, and we'll dive into writing and genealogy and uncover the surprising supernatural elements that surface in family history research. Come along with me on this journey of discovery. Hey, this is Natalie, and welcome to episode 169 of Flower in the River. Before we begin, I want you to know that I will be pronouncing or maybe mispronouncing a number of different Polish words in this episode. It's not for lack of trying, but even when I was looking at various pronunciation guides, believe it or not, many of them didn't agree with one another either. So I did the best I could, and just bear with and trust that my relatives who live in Poland right now will be sending me emails after this episode letting me know where I have gone astray. So it's time to get started. And we are going to pick up from where we left off last week. And I hope that you had a chance to listen to last week's episode, A City of Sorrow, A Voice of Fire. It is centered around an article that appeared in the Chicago Examiner on July 26, 1915. It's called Hawthorne, A City of Sorrow, Community Hushed by Death. It is by Edith Franklin Wyatt, a very well-known author and writer during the early to mid-20th century. And as it is with so many others, her article and her name are omitted from any current Eastland disaster history platforms. In the article that I shared last week, she mentioned a number of people, and I want to introduce you to two of them today. And it's okay if you haven't listened to last week's episode because I will share some excerpts with you. Edith mentioned that she spoke to two priests, Father Dedera and Father Tchaikovsky. Father Albert Dedera, this is how we met him in Edith's article. A pale young girl in a fresh white dress and a flower-wreathed hat touched the bell of the parish house of Father Dedera, priest of the parish of Mary, Queen of Heaven. Quote, "They have found Martha's body, too," she said simply. "They found her this morning. They have just sent word." She walked away quietly. "No," said Father Dedera when he came back to talk with us. "I have seen no hysteria. People are very calm. Some of them are stunned. Yesterday, many of them spent praying in church. There was not much rest last night." Although Father Dedera and Queen of Heaven Church were very much a part of the Eastland disaster history, generally they are not mentioned, with one notable and wonderful exception. An internet search revealed that this history about Father Dedera, Queen of Heaven, and the Eastland disaster, it's there. In fact, it's on the church's website. Mary, Queen of Heaven Church, along with Our Lady of the Mount Church, merged, and they created this new church called Our Lady the Mystical Rose Parish. Here are some highlights from Our Lady the Mystical Rose website under the category of History of Mary, Queen of Heaven Church. Mary, Queen of Heaven Parish in Cicero, Illinois, was established in 1911 following the efforts of local Catholics who had formed a group called the Central Club in 1908. This group petitioned Archbishop Quigley for the creation of a new parish, as there were about 50 Catholic families in the Morton Park section of Cicero in the summer of 1911. Reverend A. J. Dedera was appointed to establish the parish. A temporary church was set up in a building originally used as the Morton Park Clubhouse, later a town hall, and a Methodist Congregational Church before being sold to the Archbishop of Chicago. The church was blessed on December 10, 1911, by Archbishop Quigley and named Mary, Queen of Heaven. The first Mass was held on December 17, 1911, and additional Masses were scheduled shortly afterward. The first baptism at the parish occurred in 1911, and the first marriage was performed in 1912. A tragedy struck in 1915 when the excursion steamer Eastland capsized, killing several Mary, Queen of Heaven parishioners. Despite such challenges, the parish flourished. I will give you a link so you can take a look at this history and look at the beautiful buildings, etc. I'm very grateful to the folks at this parish who put this history together. We're going to go back to Edith Wyatt's original article, and there's a bit of serendipity that's going on here. In the opening of Edith's article, there's a brief list of other articles and books that she had written, including Heroes of the Cherry Mine. Edith wrote this article for McClure's magazine, and it was referring to the Cherry Mine disaster, which took place in Cherry, Illinois, on November 13, 1909, and 259 miners died. I was able to find the actual magazine on the Internet Archive. It had a beautiful cover with the title of the article and Edith's name, and get this, there's only one page of the article in it. Hopefully we can find the rest of it, but so close, yet so far. We'll keep hunting. But as I was researching Father Dedera and trying to get additional information about his life, he too has a connection to the Cherry Mine disaster. In the Joliet Evening Herald, December 17, 1909, I learned that Father Dedera was there ministering to people and helping out where he could. Since both Edith Wyatt and Father Dedera were probably there at the same time, I wonder if that is where they met. Now, according to the July 28, 1915 issue of the Argus Leader, Mary, Queen of Heaven Church lost 20 people in the Eastland disaster. I tried to locate the church's records on FamilySearch.org, but they only had a handful, and none of them were for 1915 deaths. Queen of Heaven lost approximately 20 parishioners. The question is, why is the name of this church, as well as its losses, omitted from the modern retellings of the Eastland disaster story? Let's explore Father Dedera's background. His birth name was Wojciech, but he was sometimes known as Adelbert or Albert. Surname was Dedera, D-E-D-E-R-A. He was born in Czech Republic in 1880. At the time it was known as Bohemia. The family immigrated when he was a child. Father Dedera lived a very active and full life. For example, I found his passport application from 1924. There he says he planned to go to Palestine, to Egypt, and to Italy. Although there's no reason for the visit given on this application, he planned to be gone for 3 months. By 1935, he was at a different parish, Our Lady of the Holy Mount Church in Cicero. During World War II, Father Dedera was very active in supporting soldiers as well as their families. He was also involved in early ecumenical efforts, meeting with Protestant and Jewish clergy. In the 1940s, that was very innovative. This article is from the Berwyn Life, November 14th, 1947, just 2 years before Father Dedera's death. Headline: Holy Mount Church is the work of Father D, and D is in parentheses. Amongst his parishioners, he was held in high esteem and with a lot of affection. To them, he was simply Father D. The hill which now bears the name Holy Mount is adjacent to the town of Pribram, about 40 miles south of Prague. From time immemorial, it was called the Holy Hill. Our Lady of the Holy Mount, 24th Street and 61st Street, is the beautiful church namesake of that hill, which has become the worship site of thousands coming annually to pray by the statue of the Virgin Mary, originally property of the first Archbishop of Prague. It has been housed in the chapel on the summit of the mount for the past 500 years. It was in January 1919 that the Archbishop, George W. Mundelein, appointed the Reverend A. J. Dedera, who had organized the Mary Queen of Heaven parish and was pastor there at the time, to proceed with arrangements for establishing a new church a mile west of the present one. Thus, it was in the spring of that year a census was taken of the people residing within that vicinity, and the Reverend Dedera, known to the parishioners as Father D, prepared for pastorship of the new church. About 100 people worshipped when the first Mass was said in the wooden building erected on the 14-lot property that had been purchased. A few weeks later, 6 of the 14 lots were exchanged for 8 lots on 61st Court to obtain greater depth for larger buildings being planned. At the end of the first year, the congregation numbered approximately 200, and it was necessary that the church be enlarged. Improvements and additions to the church were planned. In 1923, the erection of the school building was completed. In 1924, a home was purchased for the sisters. In 1925, crowded conditions made it inevitable that a larger, more modern church would have to be built to accommodate the month-to-month increase in the population of the parish. A new church building was erected the next year. Many difficulties in construction were encountered during the Depression years, but by 1931, a rectory, convent, social center, and playground were a part of the church property. By the time of the church's 1944 Silver Jubilee celebration, the entire extensive building program had been successfully completed. Father D, who has devoted so much time and effort toward making the church the beautiful worship place it is now, is still serving as its pastor. Born in Chicago, pausing here to make a correction, Father Dedera was born in the Czech Republic. Back to the article. He attended St. Bede's College in Peru, Illinois, and St. Mary's Theological Seminary in Baltimore. His assistants are the Reverend James Stanek and the Reverend George Kuchera. Among Holy Mount's best-known organizations today are the Men's Jaeger Club, founded in 1924, and the Holy Name Society, Council of Catholic Women, and the Women's Tuesday Evening Club. For young people, there are the Young Ladies Sodality, the CYO Club, and Girl and Boy Scout troops sponsored by the church. End of article. That article you just heard, that was an excellent example of why genealogists are strongly encouraged to do reasonably exhaustive research. That means examining the full array of available resources for a given time and place. That's one explanation of what that is. So it involves evaluating any record you can get your hands on to test your theories and resolve conflicting evidence and eliminate other possibilities. One of the big problems in many of the biographies of various Eastland people, besides the missing source citations, which is a fairly common thing at this point, what I often see is some sort of a story. It usually appears to be a snippet with no source, but there are no other stories. There's no corroborating evidence. So that too is problematic. A single newspaper account or even a family story. It's a start, but the research should always continue. Father Dedera's obituary appears in the October 15th, 1949 Chicago Tribune. The Reverend Albert J. Dedera, 69, pastor and founder of Our Lady of the Holy Mount Church, 24th Street and 61st Avenue, Cicero, died yesterday in St. Anthony's Hospital after a long illness. Father Dedera, who served as a Roman Catholic priest for more than 42 years, also was the founder of the Queen of Heaven Church in Cicero. He is survived by a brother, Emil Dedera, and two sisters, Mrs. Catherine Smakel and Mrs. Anna Spica. Requiem High Mass will be sung at 10:30 a.m. Tuesday in Our Lady of the Holy Mount Church. Burial will be in Resurrection Cemetery. In the obituary, there's no mention of Father Dedera's involvement with the Eastland disaster. However, thanks to that article by Edith Franklin Wyatt, we have a record of that. Father Bronislaus Czachowski was also mentioned in Edith Wyatt's article. Quote, in the Polish parish, Father Czachowski said that of the 12 recorded bereavements in his church, all had been deaths of girls between 15 and 17. Now, in the article, Edith did not supply the name of his Polish parish. However, this one was pretty easy. It was Our Lady of Czechova, Cicero. Our Lady of Czechova is one of the few parishes that's actually named several times in the retellings of the Eastland disaster, probably because they lost so many people from that parish, and also there were a number of photos from the funerals that were printed and reprinted. Even though it's mentioned, its backstory is not really told. Our Lady of Czechova, who is she? And there's your clue. As I'm going to launch into this story, there's a lot of disagreement, a lot of contradiction. I'll share with you what I have learned, and I'll list some websites that can give you more information about this. It actually is quite fascinating. Our Lady of Czechova is a painting or an icon of Mary holding the Christ child. And it was painted on wood in a Byzantine style. Tradition holds that Saint Luke painted it on a tabletop from the Holy Family's home in Nazareth. Now that's just one of the stories or traditions. Art historians date it to somewhere between the 6th and 9th centuries, likely originating in Constantinople or in Eastern Mediterranean. Now here is one story of how this painting made its way to Poland. The legend says that Helena, mother of Emperor Constantine, brought it to Constantinople. From there, it eventually made its way to Belz, which is now in Ukraine, where it was venerated for centuries. In 1382, Prince Vladislav of Opala transported it westward and entrusted it to the Pauline monks of Yasna Gora, Bright Mountain, which is in Czestochowa. So that's how the painting made its way to Czestochowa, and the monastery has been its home ever since. And if this painting, this icon could talk, the stories it could tell us. Our Lady of Czestochowa has some distinguishing characteristics. There are slashes on her face. How did this happen? In 1430, Hussite raiders sacked the monastery and slashed the painting. The 2 scars on Mary's right cheek are still visible. And according to legend, when restorers tried to repaint those marks, well, the paint kept lifting. The scars are left as they were, and the story became part of her mystique. Why is Our Lady of Czestochowa known as the Black Madonna? A lot of disagreement about that, but here's one explanation. The dark complexion comes from centuries of candle smoke and varnish oxidation. Why she matters so much to Poles. In 1655, Sweden invaded Poland in what's called the Deluge, a catastrophic occupation. The Swedish siege of Yasna Gora failed against a small outgunned garrison, and Poles interpreted this as miraculous. King Jan Kazimierz subsequently declared Our Lady of Czestochowa the Queen of Poland in 1656. So from that point, she became inseparable from Polish national identity, not just as a religious figure, but as a symbol of survival against overwhelming odds. That's the key to understanding why Polish immigrant parishes placed her so centrally. For these families, she represented everything they'd come from and everything that they had survived. She became the patroness, and she's often known as the Queen of Poland. However, don't confuse that with monarchy, okay? And there are a number of churches in the United States known as Our Lady of Czestochowa, such as the church in Cicero, Illinois. This is from the Berwyn Life newspaper. The date is November 2nd, 1945. Headline: The history of St. Mary's dates back to the late 80s. They're talking about 1880, by the way. Little did the 86 Polish families who founded St. Mary's of Czestochowa Church realize that their first church, a small wooden structure, would in a few decades become one of the largest and most beautiful edifices in the largest suburb in Chicago. Up until the year 1895, these devout Catholics walked some 3.5 miles to St. Kazimierz, the closest Polish church, and prior to 1890 to St. Adelbert's, some 5.5 miles away. Longing for their own church where they might worship more regularly, and for their own school where they might have their children educated in the faith of their fathers, the pioneers held their first meeting on March 27, 1892. By May the following year, they were able to purchase 6 lots at Linden Avenue, now 49th Avenue, and 30th Street at a cost of $2,250. The founders of this parish chose as their patroness Our Lady of Czestochowa because Mary, the wonder worker at Czestochowa, the holy city of Poland, is truly dear to the heart of every Pole. Father Slominski was St. Mary's first pastor, coming to the church on Decoration Day, that would be Memorial Day, by the way, 1895. After 4 years of pioneering at the church, Father Slominski was succeeded in July 1899 by Reverend Leo Wierkowski, who carried on the work of his predecessor until July of 1904. St. Mary's third pastor, the Reverend Bronislaus Jakowski, served the church for 35 years until his death on October 13, 1939. It was during his time that a period of expansion took place. In January of 1905, under Father Jakowski, the church began a construction of a brick church and school, and 3 years later, they erected the present convent for the sisters. In 1917, the present rectory was built. On October 29th of the same year, the cornerstone of St. Mary's present house of worship, a beautiful Gothic structure that towers above all others in Cicero, was blessed. The church, which was erected at a cost of $132,000, has a seating capacity of 1,000. In 1927, beautiful Gothic altars, pulpit, and communion rail, all of precious Carrara marble, were imported from Italy and erected in the church. His Excellency Archbishop Samuel A. Stritch appointed Reverend Theodore Langford, fourth pastor of St. Mary's, on July 13, 1940. Father Langford, who was not a stranger to the parishioners, served as an assistant from January 1912 to July 1915. It was he who organized the large apostleship of prayer in 1912, and then the famous Boy Scouts in 1913. It was from St. Mary's, too, that he was promoted to his first pastorate at St. Valentine's. Father Langford subsequently spent 20 years as pastor of the Assumption of the Blessed Virgin Mary in West Pullman. Since coming to St. Mary's, Father Langford has carried out a program of reconstruction and renovation. So you've just heard the history of Our Lady of Czestochowa in Poland as well as in Cicero, Illinois. Now, let's focus on Reverend Bronislaus Jakowski. So the 1920 census has a lot of information about him. In 1920, he was 46 years old, and he states that he was born in Poland in 1874 and immigrated to the United States in 1890. He was naturalized in 1909. This is from the Berwyn Life, October 19, 1939. Hold rights for Cicero, Polish pastor. Father Jakowski was founder of the Hawthorne Parish. Within a month of the time when unconfirmed reports of German destruction of the St. Mary of Czestochowa shrine in Poland reached this country, the Reverend Jakowski, founder, builder, and pastor of St. Mary of Czestochowa Church in Hawthorne, died at 5:30 a.m. Friday morning in the church rectory after a prolonged illness. With the Reverend Jakowski at the time of his death were Congressman Anton F. Machuski and Cicero prosecutor Julius Skrzydlewski, lifelong friends of the priest, and parish curates, the Reverend Francis Nagaluski, the Reverend Bernislaus Kajowski, and the Reverend Louis Novak. His death followed a night of suffering, bedside attendants said. He had read his last Mass on Sunday, October 1st. Requiem High Mass was celebrated at 10 o'clock yesterday morning by high church officials and burial followed in Resurrection Cemetery. Under Father Jakowski's direction, the present church structure was started in 1916 and completed in 1918. His original church was a small frame structure located on what is now 52nd Avenue. Recently, Catholic clergymen throughout the Chicago diocese paid the Reverend Jakowski homage on his 35th anniversary as pastor. Latest reports from Poland indicate that while the St. Mary of Czestochowa shrine was damaged by the German gunfire, the statue, known as the Black Madonna, in honor of which the church was erected, remained unharmed. That's the end of that obituary. I won't belabor this because I like to leave some space for people to think about what they just heard, but the striking parallel. Father Jakowski dies soon after there were unconfirmed reports reaching the United States that German forces had attacked the St. Mary of Czestochowa shrine in Poland, the very shrine his church was named for. Then later reports confirmed that the shrine was damaged, but the Black Madonna statue survived unharmed. I'll leave you with that one. Now, it's time to take a look at the records for the parishioners of St. Mary's of Czestochowa in Cicero who died on the Eastland. Fortunately, all of the records seem to be available on FamilySearch.org. And this is an example of the coveted primary source that all genealogists and historians look for. Digital scans of the original records, not paraphrases nor transcriptions. This is a significant find, and I'll explain why. As I was doing the research for this episode, I looked online and I found only one partial image from this church's interment book reproduced on a website along with a very high-level history of Our Lady of Czestochowa. I thought maybe that was all that was available, and this is why we have to question everything, because the existing research is not that detailed. And even that record on this website was only the left half of the page. So we had some names and dates, and the right side of the page, which had the details about the priests, the cemeteries, and additional information completely cropped off. Records for Our Lady of Czestochowa Church, they're available for free, but I have copied those records and I will upload them to the Internet Archive as well as to my website so you have access to them. It appears that they have been available for a very long time, so I am not sure why someone would make a decision to share just a partial record and a very high-level history. That's a head-scratcher. But the very good news out of all of this is that I have the records and I can see them in their entirety. The first two people listed in this interment book are Maria Dudek and Jan Dudek, a married couple, ages 28 and 32 respectively. I won't read the names of all of these people. There are 41 of them in total, by the way. And Father Jakowski signed off on all of these 41 burials of Eastland victims. I'll share them with you date by date. So on the 27th of July, there were 8 burials. And they're in different cemeteries, too. Most are in Resurrection, but some are in St. Adalbert's. On the 28th of July, there were 28 burials. On the 29th of July, there were 4 burials. Then, On August 13th, there was one burial of another Eastland victim. I have the feeling his body wasn't found until around that time. At the moment, I don't know how many individual funerals Father Tchaikovsky actually conducted, but the fact is, he signed off on all of them, and they were his people. He'd probably known many of them from the time they were babies, and to have to face a tragedy like this, where so many of his flock died so cruelly and so suddenly, I can't imagine what he felt. I'll say this. So grateful that Edith Wyatt wrote that article, for one thing, and I'm even more grateful that I found it. Without her article, I might never have learned about Father Dedera, about Queen of Heaven Church in Cicero, or how that parish was touched by the Eastland disaster. As for Our Lady of Czestochowa, I certainly knew the church, but I didn't know its backstory. And while Father Tchaikovsky is listed on one of the Eastland platforms, there's no information about him, and his connection to the church goes unmentioned. This is another example of why this research has to continue, because so much of the story is available, but it still needs to be told. And next week, I'll have more stories for you. But in the meantime, please take care of yourselves, take care of each other, stay safe, and I will talk to you soon. Hey, that's it for this episode, and thanks for coming along for the ride. Please subscribe or follow so you can keep up with all the episodes. And for more information, please go to my website. That's www.flowerintheriver.com. I hope you'll consider buying my book, available as audiobook, ebook, paperback, and hardcover, because I still owe people money. And that's my running joke. But the one thing I'm serious about is that this podcast and my book are dedicated to the memory of all who experienced the Eastland disaster of 1915. Goodbye for now.